I would like to start with relating to what Vigo said. He used the term participation. I will introduce the concept of engagement, מעורבות, which basically is in the core of this study that I will present. We have, for the last 5 years, the Alony Hetz project for at-risk youth and children. It's mainly taking place in the field, but we are also studying what we're doing and mainly in schools or community centers that they send the students from the school to the community centers. And so it's a grant, and we are applying the funds for the study. I would like to offer now just a window into what we're doing with at-risk youth. They are at risk of also domestic violence, low socioeconomic status, school dropouts, and other kind of risks. And I would like to introduce the framework of research that distinguished but also combines the outcome studies. Most of us used to think about studies if we see that psychodrama or music or dance works, yes or no. So we call it outcome studies. But as psychotherapy research develops, we came to understand that my personal input into it is that I'm taking it into psychodrama studies, is to connect what we call the outcome research to the change process research, which basically not only focuses on whether or not treatment is helpful for whatever reason, but what is the change process mechanism that really leads to this change. So we are not only looking at the outcome, but we are looking also on the process. As you probably know, in psychotherapy, there are common factors. One of them is the most researched one is alliance. Another one that is researched is a client involvement, which is really the degree to which the client is involved in the therapy session, such as initiate discussion or introduces new topics, self-disclosure, or things that come up. So this is a very common factor in psychotherapy, many kinds of psychotherapy, dynamic, cognitive, behavioral, narrative, and etc. So what I developed is something that is called dramatic engagement. The level of engagement in drama-based therapies, and what we're doing in the field is not only psychodrama, which is more reality-oriented, but it's also on the spectrum of, in terms of the continuous from doing things that are reality-based, like working with issues with my father, so I invite a group member to act my father, or I just put a chair if it's individual therapy. But drama therapy would use a small mouse if the child feels like a mouse, and the father is a big elephant or a big dinosaur, depending. So it's more metaphoric and less direct, we call it. So you will see in a moment the items of the measurement that I created that is called client dramatic engagement, which really assesses the degree to which client actively engages dramatically in drama-based therapies. So here is I'm not going to go, it was published and I will show you the publication afterwards. There are some initial, by the way, the preliminary findings about it's a 6-item instrument. And just as an example, the client engages in role play, played himself, herself in a situation, played a character different than self, and it's a really a therapist observation tool, and there is a final score that really reflects the level of engagement. And we build this tool from different things that we know that clients do in therapy, talking with experts. And another example the client easily stayed in the dramatic reality without falling out. You know, like in the middle of being with a scene, suddenly the child or the adolescent or even adults or our students can suddenly drop and start to laugh, and you see that it's not relevant, it's not really connected directly to the world that they are building. It is connected to their whatever they feel in the scene as person, but we call it to fall out, which is actually a term from theater. ליפול מהדמות, you know. So this is just the instrument. It's in Hebrew, but also in English. And some colleague asked me to send it. It was published, but maybe they will try to use it. If you are interested, I will be happy to give it to you. So this is the dramatic engagement. One of the tools I use to validate this my new instrument is by looking at the correlation between my new instrument of dramatic engagement and the already established instrument of client involvement, which is more generic. And you can apply it in any kind of therapy. Another instrument that we used that I borrowed from Clara Hill, who is an American really leading psychotherapy researcher, is the client in-session behaviors. It's also rated by the therapist, but the thing is that it has specific responses that she found really exist in all kinds of therapy. And it includes 4 productive behaviors: cognitive behavioral exploration, emotional exploration, insight, and therapeutic change. I'm not going to get into the definitions of all of it. You can read it in the article and, of course, in her publication. And I used one less productive behavior, which is resistance. And the fourth instrument we used was the bond subscale of the therapeutic alliance measure. It's just the bond subscale because this study was not manualized. It didn't have a protocol. It was a study, a naturalistic study. We examined whatever happened in the field with the children at risk, and we just came and took the picture. We measured a few times during the year. I will show you what happened. We didn't induce any kind of intervention because we were not allowed. We were only allowed by the Ministry of Education to, measure whatever happens in the field. So, and the overarching purpose was to really uncover the mechanism of change or how change works. There is a different study that really looks at the relation between process and outcome, but I'm not going to talk about it here. So in this pilot study, we had 16 participants. The bigger study has around 200, but I'm just looking now on this subsample just to demonstrate how we did and what we did, to show basically, and I'm jumping to the bottom line, how we can really apply tools and methods that psychotherapy research already has been using for the last, 20 years. And at least in drama, no one uses it. They're just now starting to use it a little bit. Yes, okay. So I'm just going to show you, these are the scales. So first of all, both the dramatic engagement and the client involvement, which of course we expected they would be correlated and would show a similar trend, grew during the session. And look, we measured around 22 sessions, which is quite a lot in the school system because every now and then they're going to a vacation, a holiday, or they're going to a trip. So we measured and you can see the dramatic engagement grew even more. It was easier for the therapist to report about the dramatic engagement than the regular client involvement, because the dramatic engagement is really behavioral. So it's really, really easy to observe. So there is significant correlation between the two measures, which is one step towards validating the new tool of dramatic engagement. And it's in the expected trajectory of growth. as you go on with the therapy, you would expect the child to be more, I mean, if it goes well, to have a safer environment and to feel more alliance and stronger coherence in the group. It was a group therapy. We insisted that each session would be 90 minutes at least, which is basically 2 hours in the school system, 2 teaching hours. So, yeah. And this is the growth of the client behavior. So you can see that most of them are also with an upward trajectory: the cognitive behavioral exploration, the emotional exploration, all those tools that we used, the insight and the therapeutic change, and the resistance. Even though it started low, it does have a downside trajectory. So as therapy proceeded, from the first to the 22nd sessions, the resistance decreased. And I want to say another thing. Statistically, we controlled for the differences in therapists because we have 3 different therapists, and we also controlled for differences in the school and in other factors that might influence. It's a nested data, we call it, of clients within different groups with different therapists. So we statistically controlled for the difference. So, yeah. So we wanted to see if dramatic engagement, the degree to which the client is dramatically engaged in the session, correlates significantly with the positive also change in the therapeutic bond. And what we saw, and I will explain in a second why I think we saw that, it really correlated with the therapist perceived bonding and not with the bonding that the child also reported. So what I think is, first of all, the sample is very small, but also it's a methodological bias, which means that if therapists reported the dramatic engagement, so it's much more likely that it will be highly and significantly correlated with their own report of their alliance than with what the child reported about the alliance, even though we saw a growth trajectory in both measures, but they weren't correlated, statistically at least. And the third hypothesis, which is the most interesting for me, is we calculated odds ratios, which means basically what are the odds, what is the likelihood that if you see a certain level of dramatic engagement, that you will be able to predict the productive behaviors in therapy that other psychotherapies reported in other studies with our sample. So you can see that 1 unit increase in dramatic engagement, yes, this really had a 4.3 likelihood, which is the highest one. It's of cognitive behavioral exploration. And you can see that if there is 1 point increase with dramatic engagement, there is 2 of increase in therapeutic change, which is basically how much you think that there is a change in something that is significant for the clients. And here you can see that resistance, basically it was the opposite. As we had with more dramatic engagement, the odds of seeing resistance decreased, which is logical because one of the most 2 explanations for the top ranks. I will only now focus on cognitive behavioral exploration and resistance. First of all, in a different paper, which is I'm showing a model that I developed with my colleague, also our faculty, Dr. Bracha Zulay, we conceptualize through really cognitive behavioral perspective, behavioral problem as maladaptive roles. We don't call it pathologies, we don't call it problems, problematic behaviors. We call it maladaptive roles because we think that it's a not stigmatizing perspective, it's a theatrical viewpoint, And children are really, really easily relating to this conceptualization. So we think that because and this is something that we also emphasized in our other paper, that if dramatically you look on behaviors as roles, so of course can be expected that there would be a behavior. If a behavior is a role, and cognition, we use the double technique, which is basically trying to expand or alter cognitions about myself, about other people. It's very, it makes sense that the cognitive behavioral or the roles that we explore dramatically will correlate with dramatic engagement, because they are correlated. And the last thing, כמה זמן עוד יש לי? Enough. The last thing is that dramatic engagement really decreased resistance. This is something my colleague here, Ines, knows, because in psychodrama we see resistance as the decrease of spontaneity and the ability to really act in the moment. And Moreno, the father of psychodrama, and after him, Kellerman and other philosophers and therapists really relate the inability of the child or the client to jump into the stage or engage in the drama to anxiety or feeling really less spontaneous. So spontaneity in psychodrama is like the positive opposite of libido or whatever, that it's really a life force for Moreno. It's the readiness to react to whatever comes, be it trauma, be unexpected things in life, the readiness, the pre-creative state of being ready to respond on the spot to whatever comes in life, relationship, whatever. So yes, resistant psychodramatically is the lack of spontaneity, the lack of ability to engage dramatically in the session. So some future directions that I'm really interested on. So first one is, does a strong client-therapist bond lead to greater dramatic engagement? Or some studies, not in psychodrama, in psychotherapy, I remind you, this is the first one in psychodrama, says that client involvement may influence the level of alliance. Other studies found the opposite direction, that alliance allows the client to get involved. It might be bidirectional. It might be reciprocal in a way, but we don't know yet. But dramatically, it's very interesting for me to continue to investigate it, because it doesn't exist. What is the link between client openness to experience? Now, openness to experience is the big five, yes? It's a personality tendency that relates to creativity. If psychodrama and the arts therapies in general is about entering some kind of a potential world, dramatic world, some kind of a liminal space of being and creating yourself, or experimenting with new roles, new behavior, whatever, new ways of being in the world, maybe the tendency, if we can see which is really related to what Uri said yesterday, that if we find the clients or the participants in the study that are more receptive to the intervention, you might see a much more powerful result, and you can know which therapy is best to someone else. So this openness to experience is really, and Dita also used this measure, I know. It's very significant I think in our field, to include in studies. And the third one, the client respond to drama-based intervention with different level of aesthetic distance. This is one of the most fascinating topics for me. I think that psychodrama and drama therapy work in different level of being distanced from the content. As I said, I can be a mouse or I can be a child who is abused or who is whatever. And I think that different level of aesthetic distance can really, some people it can really liberate if it's distanced, And my own clients, adult clients that I work with, they don't want it distance. They come to the therapy and they say, cut the bullshit. Don't work with me with masks, don't work with me with cards. They want the direct work, dramatic work. They want to sit in the chair and talk to their unfinished business with abuser or father or whoever. They really want the direct encounter. This is my experience with most adults, not with the students. In a student, it's privilege. They like to do all kind of experiments, but it really doesn't represent. And the last point that I'm concluding with is that can resistance be decreased through the use of symbolic situation and roles, which really relate to the dramatic distance. If someone is resistant, maybe it really relates to being too direct. Maybe I should introduce something that is less direct. One of the nice saying about the difference between psychodrama and drama therapy, to those who are still confused, and it takes time to understand, is that psychodrama really is a front door. Psychodrama is a front door to the client's experience, and drama therapy goes from the back door. It's drama therapy. So just a symbolic distinction between this. And so these are really interesting questions to me to think about, and this is what I think. And I'm trying to disseminate our work in different platforms, not only in platforms that we can, it rather easily can publish. So I'm going to present my study in the American Psychological Association in August. They have a Division 10, which is the psychology of aesthetic, creativity, and the arts. And they want studies about arts therapies, but they don't want only case studies. They want rationale, and Neta is coming with me, our Rachel's PhD student. I wish she was my student, but anyway, they're thinking theoretically and methodologically sound studies that can really communicate what we're doing. Yes, I finished the last one. This is the article that was published and with my colleagues. And this is now was accepted to clinical psychology and psychotherapy, which is not in our field, but we cautiously, we try to introduce what we're doing to other disciplines. Thank you very much.